Matt said to me, I want Ada to be a firm where you can have children, and I want you to be able to go into a meeting with an investor and you can breastfeed your baby in that meeting with that investor, which at the time I thought was a bit weird because
We've raised over £100 million for our business, got incredible companies in the portfolio. It's been a heck of a journey. People look on the outside, look at it now, it's a shiny thing. We know every single thing it took to get there, and it really was the opposite of that for a long time.
I think when I first met Matt, I sort of didn't really believe in him. As in, I didn't believe that he was a real person.
It's the first time you've heard that.
I was all in. I had 2 young kids, very young at the time. One of them had probably just started at a private school. Again, that's a very strange decision with no money. What on earth was I doing starting a business?
Hello and welcome back to the Courageous Leaders podcast. On today's episode, we have Czech Warner and Matt Penneycard, co-founding partners of Ada Ventures, a venture capital firm investing in tech that makes life fairer, healthier and more sustainable. This interview is for those of you who need to build great relationships with the people you work with, especially if you're business partners. It's packed with how they set up a company from scratch, not really with the experience to do it, but have made it incredibly successful, but fundamentally because of the relationship they've built with each other. So let's get started. Matt and Czech, welcome to the show. It is amazing that we got you in the studio to do this.
So good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Matt, you look scared.
Just my permanent resting scared face.
So I'm going to start. I'll give you a break first. I'll start with Czech. I'd love to know, what has been a courageous moment for you?
Probably when I was about 25, I decided that I was going to switch my career from advertising, where I'd started. I'd done a graduate program at BBDO. And I went into finance, and I had no background in finance. I hadn't studied business or maths, or hadn't been in consulting, hadn't been in investment banking. And I discovered VC, venture capital, on Twitter. And I started following all these VCs. And I thought, this is such an interesting job. And I wanted to get into technology. And so I spent 6 months trying to convince someone to give me a shot in venture capital. And I think when I look back on that now, that took a lot of guts, and I don't really know where that came from. But I do distinctly remember writing a letter to my parents when I did get a job offer in a venture capital fund saying, this is why I should leave my really fun job in advertising, which I was really enjoying, and say, actually, I'm going to start in this new industry, in this new career, which I have no background in and experience in. And it's probably a 3 or 4 page letter eventually with all of their objections listed out, and then all of my kind of refuting points responding to them. So yeah, they were a bit surprised, I think, to get this letter from me. But in the end, I'm very, very glad I did make that call.
Were they in support?
No, not at all. That's why I had to write the letter. They thought that this was a really bad decision. I hadn't made it far enough in my advertising career, and I should, do more time there. I think they were worried that I would be kind of put in a sort of side role and I wouldn't actually be an investor and writing checks. I think they thought I was going to be a kind of secretary or PA or something. And I was really frustrated because I kind of wanted to do this and I felt it was the right thing. And I felt I really couldn't communicate that to them. And I think that quite often we have these kind of expectations maybe and assumptions that our parents put on us, and we sort of have to overcome those before we can decide to do what we want to do.
I just find it fascinating because it's so different to the advertising world and just so interesting. So you don't know where it came from, but to have such a strong feeling that you just knew that's where you needed to be. Yeah. I think there's so many people in life just are waiting for that feeling to know, what is it? What do I want to do? So to get that, what a gift to be given that.
Well, you say it's different, but I actually found it really helpful to think about the Venn diagram of where it actually overlapped. And I found that actually it did overlap quite well. In advertising, you're all about trying to identify what consumers are going to do, where behavior is going, trends in the future. And in venture capital, it's really similar. You're trying to predict and preempt what people are going to buy, why they're going to buy it. And so I kind of pitched my experience to Matt when I met him as, the first job, he took a bet on me to hire me. And I said, I can help take what I've learned in advertising and apply it to venture capital. And I think, I'd always encourage people thinking about making a career change today to think about what's the Venn diagram of your existing experience that you can then overlap with what you want to do.
Very neat. Smart. So going over to you, Matt, what's been your courageous moment?
I think pretty predictably it's starting the company with Czech. But Well, the bravery wasn't doing it with Czech. That was a no-brainer for me. But the bravery, and it's with hindsight, I think these things always kind of make more sense when you look back on them. At the time, it didn't feel very brave. It didn't feel super courageous. It just felt weirdly inevitable. We were talking about this the other day. It just felt, I don't know why, not based on a lot of evidence that we were going to be super successful, but that it was just the right thing to do. It just felt instinctively right. And we could unpack that a little bit later on. But I think looking back on it as a courageous moment, I think it was probably, getting off the train, coming into London, having just done the third remortgage, and I was all in. I had 2 young kids, very young at the time. One of them had probably just started at a private school. Again, that's a very strange decision with no money. My wife had very bad postpartum depression at the time. And what on earth was I doing starting a business? Looking back on it. And at the time, I've made peace with that now. That courageous decision, it's paid off in spades. But yeah, I think that was, looking back on it, that was either crazy or courageous.
There's arguments for both of those, isn't it? But I think for me, that courage from both of you is this, you get strong feelings, strong instincts of what's the right thing to do. And from the years I've known you, that served you both so well, is those trusting both of your instincts. But what was it when you met each other? When did you know, hang on, you two could do a business together? When did that feeling come about?
I think when I first met Matt, I sort of didn't really believe in him. As in, I didn't believe that he was a real person.
It's the first time you've heard that.
No, as in, I didn't believe that he could exist, someone like him, is what I mean. I thought, God, this guy's kind of too good to be true. Like, he's so kind, so optimistic, and so sort of convinced in me. He can see something in me that I actually can't see in myself. And I remember you coming to my wedding and sitting next to my mum at my wedding day and saying, I think Czech has magic inside her, to my mum. And my mum obviously agreed because she's my mum. But you saying that to her was amazing, because this was before we actually started Ada together. But I think from when I first met you, you were able to see something in me that I literally did not see in myself. And you've done this with other people as well now. Multiple people have over the years said to me, Matt believed that I had something that I didn't know I had. And I think that is something so special that I want to take into my life now and think about how I can sort of apply that with young people and people on different points of their journey. Like, can you just believe in them more than they believe in themselves?
This is a very interesting thing for us all to relate to, I think. It's the core belief of the firm that we founded together, is that there is magic in other people, and that magic is not being unbottled, uncorked. And again, another core belief for Czech and me, and hopefully the firm as it grows, is we're here to teach and learn. We don't own any of these things. I'm not special because I was able to see quote unquote magic in Czech. That doesn't make me a special person. Somebody taught me years ago, and I'm just a conduit for that for other people. And I think once you realize that, it takes all the ego out of these situations, and we're not looking at founders thinking we're special, we can pick the magic better than anybody else. We've just learned to dampen our egos. And once you dampen your ego and you don't make it about you as an individual, you can then see the magic in people because you're not thinking about yourself. And I suspect that's where it came from, why I found magic in Czech. I thought I'd seen something, because that's kind of how I was raised, really.
But Matt did something really special as well. We were 10 years apart in age, starting a business together, vastly different experience. And he said, I'm going to give you 50% of the business. So when we started it as completely equal partners through absolutely every single part of everything. Not that we had any money or any revenue at the time, but if we had any revenue or any money, it would have been split 50-50 down the middle, to the extent that we shared receipts, and we made sure that we reimbursed each other, and at every step we were 50-50. And I was about 25, 26 when I first met him, and then when we started the business, I was about 27. So at the time, that was quite radical. And I think that built a really strong foundation of trust, that actually we're equals.
Yeah. And I think, so you're not going to ask any questions.
No, I'll get them.
I think to build on what Czech's saying, again, referring back to my point, which I think is so helpful to share with people, if you can be open to other people's mentoring and suggestion and not have to think, I've got all the answers. Somebody helped me with that decision. So when we were starting the company, we realized, I think, together, we're going to jump off something together. And that's the big moment. It's not about who's got more experience or more money than the other one or whatever. It's about you're going off together. You've got to be equal. And I think that applies to lots of different business scenarios that your audience will relate to. But at the time, I had more expenses in my life because I had kids, and still do have kids, but at the time I had these young kids and Czech didn't. And so we were different stages of life. And I was kind of thinking, maybe I need more salary to start with. And somebody else said to me in a mentoring style scenario, he's younger than me, I'm not saying, but said, you shouldn't do that. You should be absolutely all the way through equal. And so again, I just heard that from somebody else. So the lesson in it, the gift in it, as my coach always says to me, is what's the learning? What can you pick up on what somebody, so be open to what other people are going to suggest and you'll generally make better decisions. Like that decision has been amazing for us.
And one final thing to add to this is when we were thinking about this, I didn't make the decision on my own. And so I did have a board almost like of mentors, not that I called it that, but I remember my first boss in the agency, I said, I want you to meet Matt. And I want him to be kind of interviewed by you because I want you to run the rule over him. And she did. Yeah. She absolutely grilled him. Yeah. And afterwards she called me and she said, I think he's good enough. Yeah.
And Czech's mum did that to me as well.
Brilliant.
So I've had this woman, like the boss of this massive agency, and Czech doesn't mince her words. So it's like, I want to see if she approves of you, basically. And her mum did the same thing. Weirdly, as Czech's referred to, at Czech's own wedding. First time I met Czech's mum, which is another story. But you've got to be vetted if you're going to work with this one.
You do your due diligence, Czech. I will give you that.
I think people should have those trusted people around them when they are making these big decisions.
It was a big, big life change for you because I know, it wasn't plain sailing setting up the business. Like you both worked together before. In what was that experience like, what you needed to go through to actually get Ada off the ground?
18 months without being paid anything, with no certainty that it would be only 18 months. So we could kind of get through that. So we were just completely taking that risk. And I think, thought about different ways that we could fund our lives. And I was fortunate that I didn't have that many expenses because I didn't have children at the time. But it was just a huge risk. And there was no guarantees at the end of it that it would come to anything. And I remember distinctly walking up the stairs, Piccadilly Circus station, just kind of thinking to myself, I'm not being paid for this. I'm going into an office every single day. I'm kind of acting like a VC, having a deal flow meeting, talking about companies. Is this just a hobby? Is this actually a job if I'm not being paid? But we had to do that because we were almost pretending we were in a fund before we had a fund. Yeah. And I think that manifesting of behaviors and consistency and showing up is something that our investors wanted to see. And eventually, it was more like 2 years, we did get our first revenue into the company.
How did you keep going for 2 years? I'm more thinking of not financially, just the mindset to keep going and have that trust.
We were weirdly just lockstepped. And so bizarrely, it felt like when I was having a bad day, Czech just had the energy and vice versa. So partly it was that. We also had a real laugh whenever we could do. I remember landing at Gatwick Airport after another potentially fruitless fundraising trip. And this thing cost us a lot of money to go around the world trying to convince investors to back a fund. And just cracking up with Czech at 1 a.m, going back through the North Terminal, back to wherever we, and I think there's something here that's partly how we kept going. I think also you talk to us about trust quite a lot in our sessions and how we build that in the team that we're building now. And I think that we had that, and partly we had that through, I remember right at the start when we decided to try this, we were both getting job offers and approaches by other VC firms. And I got one from some friends of ours who said, we need temporary to come in for a few months and do this. And I don't know, had this idea. So why don't you take both of us and we'll just share the money and we'll do half a week. So you get the same, but we're better as a team. We're greater than the sum of the parts anyway. And I think that going through things like that, we just realized, didn't we, that like I can trust this person emotionally, everything else. Yeah. And I think that's partly how we kept going as well.
It's just that backing, isn't it? It's like you're actually looking out for each other. It's not looking out just for yourself. It is that whole team.
Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already,
to please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It's a small action that makes a big difference. You'll be the first to know when new episodes drop, and your support helps us create meaningful content for leaders like you. I'd also love to hear from you, so if you have any thoughts, questions or ideas, pop them into the comments. And if you're curious about how my leadership coaching or training could support you or your team, just drop me a DM and we'll set up a call. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the episode.
When did you have that moment when you actually maybe started to see each other's differences or start to going, oh, that's actually pissing me off a little bit that they do that? Who wants to go first?
I'm going to get in here before Czech pulls out the list. Right. Yes, very fair question. We were in King's Cross, so we had all these different offices. We'd squat where we could work for free. People were incredibly generous to us, and they kind of liked us, and they said, you can have an office here for a bit. And that, weirdly, just that one thing gave us a bit of confidence. Back to your prior question, gave us some sort of validation, didn't it?
Yeah.
And we had this one office in King's Cross. Shout out to Balderton, who supported us. They were just great. They don't even know how much that meant to us. And we used to go to this, we'd buy the cheapest food you could find for lunch. And I remember leaving one of these lunches nearby, and Czech saying to me, Matt, I'd like to give you some feedback. And I was like, what? What's feedback? I don't like the sound of this. Where's this going? And she basically said something to the effect of, look, you're very opinionated with other people. You kind of make these snap opinions about people. And I'm not sure it's really serving you very well to be like that. And I realized very quickly, she's only doing that to try and help me be, she's literally only doing that to make us better, to make me realize that. And I wasn't experienced in feedback. But I think that's when I realized, and it's been a journey for me, as you well know, to try to operate in that way. I'm not that, but to understand when you've got that trust basis, when someone says, hey, you could do this a bit better, it's okay. They're not saying, I don't like you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really hard though. I mean, I think particularly because we had this dynamic where Matt was my boss. And so being able to learn how to deliver feedback in a way that wasn't too direct, which is definitely something I have a tendency to do and have been described as critical at times recently. But I think I've tried to learn how to sort of give feedback in a way that is constructive and kind, and I think learning also from you, because I think you are deeply empathetic and so gentle and kind. And sometimes that's also tricky because it means that people don't get the gift. I do think feedback is a gift very strongly, and I want it, and I always ask for it. But some people find it more difficult. So I think we've learned over time to get that balance right.
Yep.
It's very hard.
Yep.
I've tried it and failed it many times. And I remember once Czech was on Sky News or BBC News or, and doing her thing and, opining about venture capital. And Czech's amazing at this, just shows up and just, talks on Sky News. And I remember straight after she came off, I said something like, oh, Czech, here's a bit of feedback. I'm not sure that your hair looked great, or something terrible like that. And Czech was like, thanks. I'm not sure that's really what I want to hear right now.
Yeah, I've got to remember that now.
I remember that one.
Which is fair enough. So you've got to learn when to do it, how to do it.
Yeah.
Somebody's probably had quite high sort of energy anxiety about something like that. You don't need to do it then. So it's a learning process.
And I think particularly in what we do, because it is so much about confidence. I mean, being an entrepreneur in general, you have to have a lot of confidence, but our entrepreneurial venture is about doing something very different. We're saying we think venture capital needs to be different. We want to do it in a new way. We want to back different founders. We think that being more inclusive is a way to, drive the best returns. And we are currently this year facing the biggest headwinds to that conversation about DEI that there's really ever been since we started doing this. And so it's really vulnerable, actually. Going out there every single day is a courageous moment to be leading Ada, to be talking about inclusivity when there's just a lot of pushback and a lot of negativity. So I think just protecting the core of those values and beliefs is really important, and trying to understand what are those person's values and beliefs? And I don't want to say anything that really goes against those core values, because that would really hurt them.
Yeah. And something I can do to reflect back, because obviously we've been working together quite a while now, is like your willingness to both learn and lean in and change and be adaptable, I think has been massive. And I think one of the key things you both do is you self-reflect. So you do always take a moment to go, hang on a minute, why did I do this? What caused me to do this? And then your investment in making sure people are clear on the company's values, knowing what their individual values are like. I know you take a lot of time to find out who your team are as individuals to know then how you can help them. And I'm just curious as well, because I know in terms of then your leadership styles, what's worked well coming together in the way you lead now you've got a team, and what's actually been challenging in suddenly it's not just the Matt and Czech anymore, but there's more people. What's been the good stuff and what's been the more slightly more challenging stuff? Who wants to take that one?
I can take the good stuff.
And Matt, we'll do the challenging with you.
You do the challenging stuff. I think the good stuff has really been, working with you around understanding where people are at. And we have a map now, which is everyone's personalities on a bit of a board. And so we can kind of see, okay, this person's green, we use disc, thanks to you. How am I going to communicate this message to that person? And I hope our team would say that we try to adapt things to them. And we do have a really diverse team, and it is by design, but it does create some challenges. And I think we need to be really eyes open to that. I think you get the best out of people, but also it does take some working through. So I think that's also something we've had to kind of learn for each other as well. And it's been just trying to find times together. I think one of the things you coached us about is to say, you're just not really spending enough time together. We're so busy, we're hectic, we're traveling all the time. Can we come back together and just have times even which are not about work directly, but we have a Tuesday morning breakfast, which is just me and Matt. We kind of come together, and it is one of the most joyful moments in the week, probably the most joyful moment in the week, because it's just reconnecting.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest bits has been Czech and I have had a very intense work relationship, and we are both open to learning from each other. And I remember seeing Czech in the very early days of Ada pitching seemingly random people on the fund. And I thought, what is she doing? They're not going to invest in the fund. Why is she doing that? And I've learned from her to try that, to be more open. And I think that we had the blessings and the value of that experience together, going through the things we've been talking to you about today. Yeah. And that's just forged something which is quite intimidating for a team, because it does feel like the Matt and Czech show, and it kind of looks like that externally. It feels like that probably internally to a large extent. And also we own 50% of the firm each. And so we've taken 100% of the risk between us, and our standards are extremely high. And that's been quite I would say that's a hard thing. What are the expectations of an employee versus an owner? How do you encourage employees to have ownership mentality is a journey for us. A journey, and I think those are things everyone listening can relate to that. And linked to that is really joy. You remember, like, we have the word of the year, and 3 years ago it was joy, and, we do these random things with you. But joy is incredibly important. For God's sake, we're spending, Kev was saying earlier, you're spending like a third of your time at work or whatever it is in your life. How can you maximize moments of joy? And that's what we try and do. We try and celebrate some things. We're not great at that yet because we don't feel we've kind of earned the right to be too celebratory, but you can still have moments of joy. Tuesday morning is absolutely joyful. And by the way, it's a system. Go to the same restaurant, eat the same food, sit in the same place.
You don't have to think about it.
Don't think about it, but it's a great restaurant. It's really the whole thing's really joyful.
But I think over time, we also are just bringing in more of a team. We're building an institution, and we set out actually quite intentionally to do that. There's loads of financial firms that are called the surnames and agencies of the people that founded it. And we decided absolutely not to do that. We named the firm after Ada Lovelace because we knew we wanted to build an institution. And over the last, mostly kind of, I think, about 3 years, we've brought in incredible senior leaders and enfranchised them and, compensated them well as well, which is important. I think when people talk about, we want you to be owners, but they're not actually treated as owners, then it doesn't really work. So we are moving towards a team and an infrastructure that's much, much bigger than Matt and I.
And I would also say, I know you're not getting to ask many questions here, but Czech and I are making all this stuff up as we go along. And I know that you've helped me understand, Matt, everybody's doing that. It was running a bit, but it's still hard to relate to that because this is my only experience of it. And so I often think, like, God, I wish I had a boss, or I wish I had someone I can go to. And that's why mentoring is so important. That's why coaching is so important. This is not an advertisement for your coaching.
Thanks, Socha.
But the coaching and mentoring, what we have done without coaching and mentoring.
Yeah.
And I think trying to learn, how do you hire a high performance team? How do you build a high performance culture? How do you build an enduring institution as opposed to just something that enriches you and me?
Yeah.
All these things are massive questions, and you kind of have to, back to something Czech was saying earlier, you have to always act as if. This is something my sister taught me, like act as if, and people buy into that. It's just a natural human thing. But it's really hard to always act as if when you don't know the answer. And we have these moments of like, what do I do? Might voice note you, might call Czech.
Have someone you can reach out to. Yeah.
You got to try, if you're going to build a business and kind of go out on your own, you got to have the instinct that it is the right time to do it for whatever that may be, and analyze that. And like you would do, test that against other people, test your thesis. And then you've got to have a team around you of mentors, bosses, coaches, non-exec, whatever it might be for you. For us, it's our partnership. We can say each other anything. And you've helped us structure that to be constructive. But you're not on your own, is what I've realized. Whereas for a long time, it probably did feel a bit like we're all kind of on our own here.
Yeah.
Even when I was on my own, or felt I was on my own, I actually mentored myself through voice notes.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you remember this, but I was recording, and I still have them. I listened back to them at the lowest ebb moments. Like, we got a rejection from an incredible institution that was going to be our kind of anchor investor. And I was in Amsterdam recording myself a voice note saying, this has just happened. I'm trying to process it. And actually just having a bit of distance from even yourself in the exact moment means you can listen to that back. Now we're 7 years later from that. And I journal as well. And that also helps with that self-reflection.
Another thing that is trying to be helpful to your audience, like these tips and tricks. We had this Google Doc, and we spent like almost 2 years going around the world, making all the mistakes. And that's fine because we're doing it together. We're laughing about it and learning from it. We had this Google Doc, and I think I'm right, it got to 400 pages or something.
Wow.
It was some massive, and we just wrote every meeting, a report on every meeting. I think we did 330 meetings.
Yeah.
And so we wrote up each one. And so we had that as a result. It sounds like loads of work, but it's not at all. You just get out of the meeting and brain dump it in, and we could search it. It was searchable to find out what were the learnings.
It's so important, because when I was learning how to sell, they said you should do a sales journal every day of what went well in the sale, what would you learn differently from the sale. And you said, I think, that documenting it in the moment as well, because it's so quickly gone, what you're getting. So what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, we took 58 flights in that time. We had 150 versions of our pitch deck. We had this epically long document. We did meet hundreds and hundreds of people. And in that process, we got told a lot of things like women can't make money. We got told you're an odd couple. Do you remember that line?
Yeah.
You don't really sort of fit.
You're too nice.
Too nice.
Too nice.
Wow.
So that's what there were lots of reasons. And we got, you can imagine sort of 200 and maybe 300 no's, but we got enough yeses.
And the context of this, right, again, trying to sort of share our journey for people thinking about, should I be brave? Should I be courageous? Should I go out there? We, in those contexts of what Czech's talked about, those flights, those meetings, those pitch decks, we made all these mistakes. We showed up at Harvard University endowment, one of the biggest endowments in the world. It's hundreds of billions of dollars, whatever it is. We got a meeting by pure hustle. We got in there. We made our presentation, and they said, what's your fund size? And we said 30 million or whatever it was. And they sort of looked at us quizzically and said, well, our minimum check is $100 million. So effectively, what are you doing in this office?
Wow.
And so we kind of left pretty sheepishly. I remember we took a photograph of ourselves, a selfie on the bridge in Boston there. Yeah, so we went through all that together, and that's what you've got to do. When we sit here today, we've raised over £100 million for our business. We've built a team of 9 incredible people, or 7 people other than me and Czech. It's institutional grade. It's been regulated and authorized directly since day one. It's an amazing thing. We never stop to think about those things, but that's what it is. Manages capital for some of the best investors around the world. Got incredible companies in the portfolio, working with all these leaders. It's been a heck of a journey, but people look on the outside, look at it now as it's a shiny thing. we know every single thing it took to get there, and it really was the opposite of that for a long time.
Did it ever get to the point, did either one of you start to break, to go, I just can't do this anymore? Did that ever happen?
I think it's the yin and yang that Matt talked about earlier. I think there probably were moments where individually we felt, I don't know if I can go on. And I think you were under a like serious amount of pressure and strain, financial strain. But I think every time one of us was in that place, the other one said, we've just got to keep going. And I think we now try to do as much as we can about giving back to people who are on that fundraising journey. We've done a lot of lobbying. We just had a really fantastic win, which was that the government just announced 500 million for diverse and emerging fund managers to try to avoid what we went through. We've helped, other people along that journey because it was so lonely and so isolating, and so there was so much strain. I'm not sure why we didn't break, honestly.
I know you're kind of making me feel quite emotional about that time. And I think financial anxiety is something I always want to bring up, because it's like people don't talk about it in this. I mean, you just have to talk about it. And we spent this time in Czechs, right? Like we were both under massive financial strain, and I'd taken out the third mortgage and the kids and funding everything got to pay for and funding the business. We put loads of money into the business and into the funds themselves to be aligned with the investors. Czechs written about this brilliant piece, which you put in show notes, about the privilege of being able to do this. But ultimately, I think that built up for me a lot of it's lasted a long time, the financial anxiety, frankly. Yeah. And you two both know a lot about that because I've shared it with you both, and you've both helped me get through it. But again, that's the sort of things that people don't talk about, the nasty bit, the ugly bit. It's like, it's pretty horrible, like going back to your family and thinking, what am I doing? So probably moments like that, rather than I can't keep going, I had certainly must have had moments like that.
I think the thoughts can just take over your mind, isn't it? And you can just spiral for a bit, and then it's like, how do you come back?
Yeah, but you can find outlets. And again, I think in the spirit of sharing, I really got into my running around that time, and that was my outlet. And that kind of, that was meditative for me, or therapeutic for me. And you can do it any way you want to. It doesn't have to be something
you had
like that.
Something that was
I had
released.
something that allowed me to balance myself out.
You mentioned the privilege article there. I know that was a very vulnerable moment for you doing that. Can you just give us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we managed this huge feat. We raised $34 million for our first fund. We just had closed it. We were about to do the announcement at TechCrunch Disrupt in Berlin, big tech conference. And part of me I don't really know why, again, I did this, but I just felt that so often people just post-rationalize success, and they just say, it was easy, or I'm so great that this is what I did and how I did it. And again, I don't know where this came from, but I just felt it's such a lie. Actually, the reality is I went to private school. I grew up in London. I went to a school where maybe kind of half the people got into Oxbridge. So that was a huge leg up. I then was able to get into a graduate scheme, partly because I had a great, degree. I then, from an advertising scheme, I was able to get into finance again, probably because of connections and nepotism and network and things. And I was able to move back in with my parents. So I didn't have the issue of people who have to kind of move to London and they have to pay rent. So I was able to fund part of my journey that way. And just all these things, these compounding little financial advantages led to being in a position to being able to take all this risk. And this is so fundamental to venture capital. We talk about, you want to be out there on the risk spectrum. We want you to take all this risk and put all the chips on the table and things. And who gets to do that? It's people who have all these unearned advantages going back for a long time. And even just the way that we talk, for example, and, our faces fit, and we're cis and we're white and we're, all these things. And I just wrote about this, and I felt so sick publishing this because I don't really want to talk about that particularly. I kind of want to be, isn't it great that I've done this all myself? But actually, it was so well received. People were kind of like, oh my God, you've actually called out this. There's a lot of other people in the industry in venture capital who don't really talk about the family money that they have that have got them to this point. And that's fine. But I think given our mission at Ada and given what we're trying to do and make the ecosystem more inclusive and fair, it was really important to me to call out that actually I'm not an example of someone who's come from a really difficult background. And I hope that in the future, it's not going to require someone who has privileges in their background to do something like Ada. And that's what that's what we are working on.
Yeah. And that did take a lot of courage, because you said it's not being spoken about. And I know it was something that was kind of eating away at you. And I think to find then your voice, to put it out there, I think that was almost quite therapeutic for you to say, like, I need to get this out of my head and get this out into the world so I can own it and accept that this is my background and not feel guilty that this was my background.
It's so funny. My friend, a really good friend of mine, said, you've Eminem'd yourself. You know, in the 8 Mile, the film, where he talks about all the things that people have said to him. Yeah. And I think it was kind of like that, in that, it was a release for me, and people's kind of response to it was, because people know. It's not like people don't know this stuff. Like, you think you've sort of maybe got this perception of people think of you in a certain way, but actually when you're completely honest and you lay everything out there, people respond to that so well, because they're like, we kind of knew that anyway, but it's so nice that you're being yourself.
Yeah. And people can relate.
Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, to please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It's a small action that makes a big difference. You'll be the first to know when new episodes drop, and your support helps us create meaningful content for leaders like you. I'd also love to hear from you, so if you have any thoughts, questions or ideas, pop them into the comments. And if you're curious about how my leadership coaching or training could support you or your team, just drop me a DM and we'll set up a call. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to the episode.
Another area I want to make sure we cover, with a lot of partnerships, when, especially kind of male-female partnerships, but all partnerships, when children come into, because they say you're so busy, you're building a very successful business. Suddenly you've already got children. Check, you didn't when we started, but then wanted children, now have children. How did that dynamic work with children coming into being founders of a business that's scaling pretty quick?
It didn't work very well for either of us. But again, that's just the journey. That's the kind of the lumpy bits. And so, when we started the business, I think my kids were 3 and 2, 4 and 3, something like that, which in and of itself I wouldn't really particularly advise that. And again, as I said, like, my wife Lucy's been incredible through this and supported us as the same, like, we've been supported by these people at home to go and do this and actually live our dream. This is our dream, right? Let's make no bones about it. We both say to each other on at least a monthly basis, I can't believe we get to do this job. And it's not false, whatever. It's like, we really love the job. And it's our firm. So we've got autonomy and agency, and we know how lucky we are. So I don't just want to say how hard we've worked and all that. It's incredibly fortunate. But we're backed by those people, and unconsciously by my kids as well. They were backing me because I wasn't around very much in that period of time. And it was really imbalanced, our partnership at that time, in that one area. It's really hard. It's really hard for Czech. Why don't I get all of Matt? Or some version of that would have been in her head. Czech's very like, equality is incredibly important. And that wasn't equal. She was able to work 18 hours in a day, and I wasn't, because I really wanted to be there when I was there. I wanted to be there for my kids. And so we definitely had tensions about that. So that was hard. That didn't work. Yeah. Right. But that's not the end of the world.
No, but you found your way through it. And then when obviously you decided to have children.
Yeah, well, I think Matt makes a really good point, which is the partners that you choose, your life partner and your business partner, absolutely critical in, can you have children and do a business at the same time? So I was incredibly lucky to have Paddy, who's been an absolute rock and just hero through all of this. He's my husband. But when we were talking about setting up Ada, and in the first few months of even thinking about Ada, Matt said to me, I want Ada to be a firm where you can have children, and I want you to be able to go into a meeting with an investor and you can breastfeed your baby in that meeting with that investor. Which at the time I thought was a bit weird because I was 27. I was like, okay, that's kind of that's quite a lot. But it was so amazing. And this is what I mean about like not really believing you, but in you, in the sense that I didn't really believe that someone sort of could think that way. But as a 27-year-old woman who was thinking about, okay, I do want to have children. I do want to do that at some point. I kind of need to get to a certain point in my career before I can do that. and all these things that go through your head. To have Matt saying that to me was just an enormous vote of confidence and feeling of stability. And, it's not going to all go wrong. And he's not going to sort of be horrified if I tell him that I'm pregnant. And then subsequently he kept saying, when are you going to have a baby? Which again, maybe could have been weird, but actually it wasn't weird, because we'd had this foundation of knowing that we wanted to build Ada into a firm where people can have families. And I'm pleased to say that the Ada team has had 5 babies since we started as Ada across the team. There's only 9 of us.
You can't claim credit for this.
Well, I do want to claim credit for it, because I think it's really special, because I do think you have to feel comfortable and supported enough to want to have children. And I have now a 1 and a 3-year-old, and I'm kind of now much more empathetic to what happened when we first started the business. And I had sort of forgotten that tension that I'm sure I was not very understanding about at the time. But we feel it's really important that people can show up for their families, whether it's children or parents or pets or other things in their lives that are important. And so our team have the flexibility and the knowledge that they can just go and do that when it's important.
I just wanted, before you go, so I'm going to jump in before you jump in on me, that competition between me and Matt here. Yeah. For you personally, having the children, how did that change you? Because, you're this fast-paced, dynamic, working 18 hours, like incredible, like I don't know how you do it, to suddenly you've got something that made you have to slow down. How did that impact you?
Yeah, I had a really difficult birth with my first baby, and I had a 3rd-degree tear. It was birth that had interventions and forceps delivery. And really what that meant was I couldn't do anything impact exercise for 6 months at least, and was actually told, you may never make a recovery from this. And as someone who's really active, who's really fast paced, and, I love playing tennis and all these things, it was really, really difficult. We did a lot of coaching through that time, and I'd really recommend that if anyone has something like this. But I think for me, the biggest lesson was patience. And just belief, blind faith that it would be okay. And I had to just do all the physio for 6 months and beyond, and basically do it all my life. But I can now do the things that I used to do, which is amazing. So that was one aspect, personally, but also just learning that there was this human who I could not control and did not fit into my schedule, and was just going to do his own thing when he wanted to do his own thing.
She's not talking about me, by the way.
Okay, well, good.
And talking
could
about,
have been.
Talking about my now 3.5-year-old. But it has been a journey, and I'm probably still on that journey of trying to work out how best to integrate the young children who have strong feelings and strong opinions and a lot of wants and needs, and a small business that has a lot of wants and needs, and then my own life and what I want to do personally.
You become very time efficient.
I try to be, but I think also just maybe recognizing, and I feel lucky because my mum also went back to work quite early after having her children. And so I think my template is that, and I think that's quite a privilege actually, because I think other people have a different template, which is I gave up work for you, or I didn't have a career. And so I think that's harder. But for me, what I knew with my mum is that she was there when it mattered, and she was there at key moments. And I try to make sure I'm there at the key moments, like the sports day, like, going to actually drop off my son every Friday morning. And that is important to me. But I know that I'm not going to be there in many of the hours in the day.
So just coming to terms with what works for your life and being okay that, because I think so often we can compare ourselves to other people, or they're able to do this or that could do, and it's actually go, no, what's right for me and my family, and that's okay. This is what we're doing. I think it's so important for women to do.
I think so. And we are bombarded with trad wives and other people doing this and people who do it all and juggling. And actually there was a great project that I saw the other day, which we can also put in the notes, which is called the Open Source Nanny. And it's people sharing their childcare setups. And people go on there and they say, I have 2 nannies. I have a weekend nanny and I have this nanny. And I, this is how I make it work. My partner has a full-time job. I have a full-time job. But it's just the honesty back to that point about this is how I actually do it. And you can just compare yourself without actually really understanding what's going on behind the scenes.
That's very helpful. Thank you. We'll definitely put that in the notes. I'd love to know, I'm going to tell you, because you didn't know which question I was going to ask here. I'm going to go to you, Matt, because I know you do a lot of future thinking, and you're very open and curious about the future, and you have this wonderful grace with embracing getting older. What would you believe that your future self, I don't know how far you want to go, what advice would they give you today?
I like the way you refer to me getting older, Jo. That's very nice of you.
Yeah.
I know exactly how old you are, so I won't hold it against you. My future self would say to me today, just keep going. You figured a lot of this stuff out now. There's loads more you're going to have to figure out, but just keep going. And by that, I mean calm, serenity, some version of peace, which is different for everybody, is really the goal. And for me, that started out, I never had any of that until Ada started to become a bit more successful, done a lot of work with you, of therapy, and I started to realize that it is all going to be okay. Whatever that is for different stories, and that's an incredibly privileged thing to be able to say and feel, to have that optimism. A lot of people don't have that hope, but I do. I've fought for it all my life, really, and so I kind of feel deserving now of it. It may not last. Other things may come and disrupt that sense of peace. But somebody in the future, a 50-year-old, which is years away from me, would say to me, keep going on this reveling in discomfort or uncomfortable or, different. And when you're younger, you want to control those things you don't want. But actually now that is the happy chaos of life, particularly with the kids and the business and all the other things that get thrown at us. Just revel in it. And that allows me to just pause, and I can just be calm.
Yeah.
And I can feel what needs to be done a bit more proactively. I can take a little bit more control over what happens in my life.
Yeah.
You can't control it all.
Yeah.
Check. You can't control it all. but you can have a little bit more influence and agency.
Yeah. Especially the minute you stop and can see it. And I think that's a really lovely lesson in that, is where you fought for this piece. And I think a lot of people sit and wait for it to come. Or one day life will just feel calmer. It doesn't. It does take putting in conscious, intentional living for how you choose to spend your time, who you spend it with, and what you spend that time doing. And you've been so conscious in the choices you make now, which you can see over the time is giving you that more freedom in your mind, freedom in your curiosity, and to just be able to sit and pause and look at life versus needing to keep trying to control it.
You can do it.
Yeah.
Anyone can do it in a way that works for them. Check and I do the same things but slightly differently. So we both do 3, 5, 10-year plans for our life, which sounds a bit mad. But you can be completely involved in that. Check can tell you about how she does it, which is very involved. Or you can do it the way I do it, which is much more have a conversation with myself in 3 years' time and 5 years' time, 10 years' time, which a great coach taught me to do. Mm-hmm. And once you do that, you've got a template. And okay, I will get up and do that yoga class or whatever it is that I don't really feel very good at, and it feels out of my comfort zone. But my 50-year-old Matt is pretty good at that and much more flexible than the 40-something-year-old Matt is. And so I have to go and do it.
Yeah. It's the best accountability buddy. Yes.
I think also what you've done, which is really helping our business thrive and our partnership thrive, is that by having that space and having that reflection time and doing all those things, you're able to show up emotionally so consistent for me and for other people in our team, and also for the companies that we look after. So we invest in these really small companies. They face all these challenges that we've been talking about because they're going through that really difficult first stage. And I think as a venture capitalist, you sort of need to meet them with a real stability and calmness when they come to you with these crises. And so I think it's particularly important in the job that we do that you're able to show up like that. Something I'm working on myself and not always getting right.
Yeah, but that consistency, I think, is everything. And I'll come to you. What would your future self advise you now?
It's really interesting hearing Matt's one, because actually my one is more about what are the risks that I now should be taking that are kind of similar to the risks that we took 7 years ago. Because I just think you've got to keep moving forward. And I think taking almost maybe the best of what Matt said, which is I now know how to show up and not get sort of overwhelmed by those risks, but also just thinking, what are the big bets that we're now making for the next 10 years? And we've got this value that we updated actually, because we changed our values recently. And we decided to introduce a value, which is the future forward mindfully. It's about bringing the future forward mindfully. And I want to think about that for our business now. What's the next kind of future forward leap? How does venture capital look over the next 20 years, and how can we anticipate that and reinvent ourselves again?
Exciting.
It's really exciting. And it's, again, as Matt says, it's such a privilege to get to do this job. I think we're so lucky to be able to think, to have the kind of ability to put our eyes to the horizon and think about the next 20 years.
I think we're both pretty paranoid about complacency.
Okay.
And even like yesterday was Tuesday, so we were at our regular restaurant having breakfast, and Czech said to me, we can't be complacent. And even now the firm is so successful, you could easily take your foot off the gas. But it doesn't feel like that to us. Yeah. It's only on reflection.
You keep doing it. Thank you. I could just carry on talking to you all day. It's been absolutely beautiful. And what's so lovely about it is this beautiful partnership, foundation of trust, high level communication, consistency with each other, appreciating, knowing each other's flaws and development areas of strengths, and actually being okay to call them out. And sometimes you'll get it wrong, sometimes you get it right, and the way you call it out. But I think what's so lovely with you two is because that trust is there, you always start with the intention must have been good. And I think unfortunately with a lot of partnerships, it's like, it's actually where you start from hang on, he may have said that wrong, she may have said that wrong, but I'm pretty sure the intention was probably right. Let me go and find out then what's really going on. And I think it's such a credit to the journey you've been on of what it really takes to form a good partnership in being able to work together. And so thank you so much for sharing all your tips, your trips, everything you've been through. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Jo.
Thanks, Jo.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone watching, or if you're listening, and we'll see you next week. If you've been enjoying the Courageous Leaders podcast, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us keep creating quality content and reaching more leaders like you who are ready to grow and make a real impact. We fund this podcast ourselves, so every subscription truly makes a difference and allows us to support courageous leaders like you. Thank you for being part of the journey.